I want to start with a question for you.
Okay.
What if one of the defining moments of the last 50 years, an event that launched a major war, was based on a mistake?
Or worse,
Or worse, a deliberate fabrication?
that's really the core question we're tackling today.
Yeah.
We often assume history is this set of confirmed facts.
Right, that it's all settled.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what we realize when you dive into these sources is that history is often just the official story that, managed to survive.
Hmm.
And a lot of crucial pages were intentionally covered up.
That's it. Our mission in this deep dive is to take this massive stack of sources. We've got articles on Cold War conflicts, covert ops, even human experimentation, and really pull out the nuggets that show the gap between the official story and the truth.
The real story.
The real story, decades after the fact.
And there is no better or maybe more infuriating place to start than the Gulf of Tonkin incident.
Oh, absolutely.
For years, the official story that escalated the Vietnam War was simple. In August 1964, North Vietnamese patrol boats attacked the USS Maddox and the Turner Joy. Twice.
And that claim of a second attack, the one on August 4th, that was the political justification they needed.
That was everything.
Administration officials like Defense Secretary Robert McNamara used that intelligence report to just rubber stamp an immediate, massive military response.
But the reality on the ground, or I guess on the water, was completely different. The naval commander on the scene, Captain Herrick, he questioned the entire thing almost instantly.
He did, didn't he? He radioed back.
He radioed back, warning that, and I'm quoting here, freak weather effects on radar and overeager sonarmen may have accounted for many reports. He said there was zero visual confirmation.
Let that just sink in for a moment.
Yeah.
A non-existent attack was used as the catalyst for one of the most divisive conflicts in modern history.
And one North Vietnamese report even suggested the American ships might have mistaken their own shell bursts for incoming fire. It was just the fog of war.
But it was used politically as a certainty of aggression. That example perfectly frames our journey today. It shows just how quickly a convenient lie can become, well, official history.
It becomes entrenched.
So let's unpack that. How do these initial, often comforting narratives get so deeply rooted that nobody questions them for decades? I imagine the intense paranoia of the Cold War was the perfect breeding ground.
It was the perfect storm. You look at the sources and you see that fear was the great enabler of secrecy. Take the 1953 overthrow of Premier Mossadegh in Iran.
Okay.
Officially, it was framed as a necessary correction,
The correction, right.
driven by these big geostrategic concerns to stop Iran from aligning with the Soviet Union, especially during the height of the Red Scare.
So the narrative they sold to the public was self-defense, not a hostile overthrow orchestrated by the CIA.
Precisely. The public, already terrified of the Soviet threat and groups like the Tudeh Party, was primed to accept that this kind of aggressive, covert action was justified.
And propaganda was the engine for that.
It was instrumental. In the 1954 Guatemala coup, Operation PBSXS, the CIA actively spread information that framed the government's dealings with the Soviet bloc as proof of communist aggression.
Which gave the U.S. aggression the veneer of hemispheric self-defense.
Exactly.
So it wasn't just about crafting a misleading narrative, it was also about systematically erasing the real one.
And that is a staggering point.
Yeah.
It wasn't enough to lie. They had to destroy the evidence that exposed the lie.
Wow.
Our sources detail the British government's 1961 instructions for something called Operation Legacy.
Operation Legacy, what was that?
It was a systemic process. Documents that might embarrass Her Majesty's government or expose agents were either shipped back to Britain or just incinerated before colonies got their independence.
So systematic historical deletion. As a conscious government policy, it just seems impossible that something that thorough could fail. But history shows there are always breaking points. When did this veil finally start to lift?
The breaking point usually comes decades later, often through, a technological advance or a massive political collapse. Think about the Venona Project.
Right, the super secret project where U.S. and U.K. intelligence were decrypting Soviet spy codes.
Exactly. The existence of Venona was kept secret for decades.
Yeah.
But when it was finally declassified, it provided a solid factual basis for understanding the true scale of Soviet espionage in America.
It confirmed the guild of atomic spies like Klaus Fuchs and Julius Rosenberg.
It did. This wasn't just a fun fact. This was foundational evidence that validated decades of suspicion.
And you can contrast that slow, tech-driven process in the U.S. with what happened in Germany after reunification. That was immediate.
That's where we see a global precedent being set. When East Germany collapsed, the Stasi records archive was immediately thrown open.
Immediately.
Immediately. Millions of East German citizens were given the right to inspect their personal surveillance files. This wasn't about verifying some abstract history.
No, this was personal.
It was tangible evidence. A citizen could hold a file detailing the communist dictatorship's crimes against them. That move towards transparency was revolutionary.
That level of transparency is incredible, but we have to acknowledge the flip side. The current bureaucracy of declassification, especially in the U.S., is just struggling under this massive volume of secrets.
That's a huge problem. Reports from the Information Security Oversight Office, the ISO, they show the sheer scale of classified records is overwhelming. The paper-based system is often called unworkable.
So historically significant records just get buried.
They get buried. And they require focused initiatives just to prioritize their review at the 25-year mark. We're often waiting decades longer just because of administrative backlog, not even intentional secrecy.
Okay, so we have two big challenges.
Yeah.
The deliberate destruction of evidence, and then the sheer volume of evidence that's too big to process. So this brings us to the core question. Why was this information hidden in the first place, and what mechanisms finally dragged it into the light?
Well, the motives for concealment, they generally boil down to a few things. Preventing criminal prosecution, avoiding embarrassment, and denying financial claims.
And the Tulsa Massacre is just a heartbreaking example of that, tying concealment directly to money and what you call something.
It is. Designating the 1921 event a race riot was a calculated move.
How so?
It allowed insurance companies to avoid paying out claims to the victims in the Greenwood district. The public push now to accurately call it a massacre reflects the documented reality.
A systematic destruction.
A systematic destruction organized by police, the National Guard, and armed white invaders against outnumbered black Tulsans. You change the name, you change the legal and moral liability.
And political expediency on the world stage, that was a whole other motive for a cover-up, right?
Yeah.
Like with the Caton Massacre.
Caton is a brutal example of geopolitical denial. In 1940, the Soviet NKVD murdered thousands of Polish officers, destroyed the evidence, and then planted false testimony to blame the Germans.
But here's the critical part.
Here's the critical pivot.
Yeah.
At the Nuremberg trials, the U.S. and Britain chose not to investigate the murders.
Why?
To avoid embarrassing the Soviet Union, their essential ally against Hitler. The truth only came out when Soviet archives were opened during Perestroika in 1990, finally confirming the NKVD's guilt.
So the need to maintain an alliance trumped justice for decades. If governments are this good at erasing records, how often do things like leaks and lawsuits become the only way to get to the truth?
They are absolutely essential mechanisms. Take the CIA's infamous MKulture mind control program.
Right.
The CIA director, Richard Helms, and chemist Sidney Gottlieb. They actively destroyed most of the records in 1973. But a single Inspector General's report from 1963 survived.
Just one report.
One report. And that was the anchor, wasn't it? Because in the 1980s, when lawsuits were filed by former unwitting subjects, especially in Canada,
That surviving report was everything.
it revealed the shocking use of drugs like LSD and methods designed for extracting information from resistant Sunnises.
Which is just a polite way of saying torture.
It's a very polite way of saying torture. It's proof that a paper trail, however thin, is often enough for a persistent public to seize on.
And lawsuits force disclosure. Diplomacy can too, right?
It can. The U.S. documents that revealed Operation Condor, this multinational terror network supported by the CIA, they were turned over to Argentina after a formal diplomatic request.
And those documents, 47,000 pages released in 2019, they confirm that Henry Kissinger,
The then Secretary of State,
effectively gave a green light to military leaders in Argentina for the atrocities of the Dirty War. These weren't intelligence failures, they were policy decisions.
which brings us to a really crucial caveat for you, for anyone listening. Even when documents are declassified, we have to be critical consumers. Declassification itself can be manipulated.
You're talking about selective disclosure, shaping the narrative by controlling what gets released.
Exactly. Our sources show that Presidents Bush, Obama, Trump have used selective declassification to shape politics. A famous example is the Bush administration cutting out dissents from the Iraq WMD intelligence estimate to sell the war.
They did that to conceal a more complicated, less favorable truth.
Right. We have to analyze why a document is being released, not just what's in it.
That's deeply unsettling. So once these hidden pages are finally revealed, how profoundly does it actually change our understanding of history and our ethical responsibilities today?
I think the impact on human cost and ethics is often the most profound revision we see. The revelations around the Tuskegee syphilis study,
1932 to 1972.
right, where researchers knowingly withheld penicillin from black men just to observe the disease's progression, and the Cold War human radiation experiments.
Like injecting hospital patients with plutonium.
They forced a reckoning.
And the revelation of those abuses didn't just shock people, it led directly to new ethical principles for human research, government apologies. But the damage to the black community's trust in public health that persists to this day.
Another massive revision is the Holodomor. For decades, the Soviet Union used propaganda to just deny the 1932-33 famine in Ukraine.
They just said it didn't happen.
But once the Soviet archives were opened, the details came out.
Hmm.
The systematic prevention of peasant migration, the blockade of famine-stricken areas, it confirmed the famine was man-made,
Driven to break Ukrainian national identity.
leading many scholars to reclassify the whole event as a genocide.
Okay, let's talk about what is arguably the most shocking historical revision of all. The near misses and the lies around nuclear danger. The official history really downplayed how close we came.
It's terrifying. Declassified documents reveal that in the late 40s and early 50s, it wasn't the Soviets, but elements within the American military who were actively intent on starting a nuclear war.
Wait. Our own military was looking to launch an attack,
They believed they had the strategic upper hand, nukes-wise.
while the public was only worried about the Soviets.
And here's where the power of concealed information becomes truly chilling. Documents reveal that military officials in the 50s and early 60s had pre-delegated authority to start a nuclear war.
Help us unpack that. What does that mean?
It means certain commanders could initiate launch protocols without any presidential input.
So the military brass kept the fact that they could basically end the world a secret from the sitting president?
That is precisely what happened. They actively denied this authority to President Kennedy, concealing a critical fact about the chain of command necessary for the survival of the species.
That's unbelievable. And the near misses just kept coming, like the 1983 Soviet false alarm.
Yeah, satellite warnings indicated a U.S. attack, and a Soviet officer, Stanislav Petrov, famously defined protocol.
He refused to launch a counterstrike.
He judged the warning to be a mistake. Oleg Kalugin, a former KGB major general, later said that the Soviet leadership's distrust of the U.S. was so intense that an erroneous report could have provoked a real first strike.
So the world was saved by the sheer accident of one officer's skepticism.
More than once, probably. We were repeatedly closer to annihilation than any official history ever let on.
So after all of this, what's the final takeaway for you? Can history ever really be fully uncovered?
I think we have to accept that history is constantly revisionist. The evidence is always partial, and interpretations differ. The evidence that survives is a result of bias, intent, and just sheer accident.
What's missing tells us more.
What's missing often tells us more than what we have. We rely on the meticulous work of archivists, whether in the Stasi archives or our own national archives, and the occasional brave individual to piece it all together.
That's a powerful realization. We rely on the whistleblowers who reveal internal memos from the fossil fuel industry, proving they knew about climate harm since 1988, just as much as we rely on the documents exposing state crimes.
The past isn't a closed book. It's a continuously declassifying document.
So let's leave you with this final thought. If the U.S. military was able to lie to a sitting president about its own power to launch nuclear war, what inconvenient truth is being quietly maintained today, just waiting for the next archival release?
The secrets are out there. Stay curious and keep digging.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.